I break myself up. My first guest is, well, there are people in the movies who are stars, and they aren't always good actresses, and there are people who are actresses who aren't necessarily stars. My next guest is lucky because she is an actress and a star, a rare combination, but one that we're lucky about, too. She's mesmerized a generation of moviegoers. She's playing Julie, whether it's Julie Marston in Jezebel, or Margot Channing in All About Eve, or in Dark Victory, or I took a list of her films at random and just ran down them: Human Bondage, Dangerous, Fog Over Frisco, Border Town, The Petrified Forest, The Little Foxes, The Letter, The Old Maid, Now Voyager, Payment on Demand, All About Eve, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and Cabin in the Cotton. I must ask her about that. Will you welcome, please, the great Miss Bette Davis.
Yes, I actually sang a song once that was on the hit parade, which was that Either Too Young or Too Old. That was in the days of the Lucky Strike hit parade.
Oh,
and it was #1 for weeks. I was never so flattered in my life that it was my song. And I begged them to let me sing it on it. But for many practical reasons, well, they couldn't, because then everybody who sang the song would want to go in the hit parade, you see, so.
Wait, you're Bette Davis, the singer?
I've done lots of singing.
I asked for Bette Davis, the actress.
Do you know I've done lots of singing?
You have done singing.
I've done a great deal of singing. In a very odd way, I sing. But I've done lots of singing. I actually did a review of a musical here in New York.
Yeah, and you sang in a couple of films.
Oh, I've sung many songs.
Yeah.
An ambition of mine, really, is to do an album of all the songs with sort of comments between Mr. Crosby, who I'm not comparing myself to singing-wise, I might add. But it would be interesting, because I have sung many songs.
Yeah.
Had I been brought up in this generation of theater, I would have learned to do musical comedy as an adjunct, because nowadays you've got to be able to do both, as you know. Matter of fact, musicals more than anything else.
There are more people in musicals than in other things. How big a range do you have? Do you have any idea?
Well, I'm about deep bass.
You are?
Yes, yes. No, I haven't a lot of range. It has sort of more personality than vocal ability, shall we say.
Well, you say that. I like the way you're attired.
You do?
Yeah, I never know. What does a lady go through when she decides to come on? Did you have a debate with yourself as to whether to wear that or something more?
Yes, you do. You do rather consider it.
Was it a toss-up between this and hot pants?
Well, you see, I am so sick of pants on women that I can't tell you. I think that all the men should go into kilts. Just as an answer.
To get even?
And you know, I wouldn't be at all surprised if it happened that men started wearing skirts.
You wouldn't?
No, but really, but you know, the pants has served a purpose, because nobody knows what length to wear the dress now. Really, I've heard many women say this, so they've gotten by the new fashion with the trousers. But I'm very tired of them, except for home and the beach and all that. I think in the evening, skirts are rather feminine. Yeah. And as regards hot pants, the name of it makes me sick.
If they,
No, I think it's a very sort of personal expression. You say, I've got hot pants for you. Well, you know, this is what it means. This is what it means.
No.
That was,
Miss
well,
Davis,
maybe it was just my generation, but in our generation, if you said, I've got hot pants for you, it meant that just one thing. And I think it's very vulgar, calling a piece of clothing hot pants.
What if they called them brief shorts? Would that...
Well, I think if they called them mini shorts, anything.
Yeah.
But hot pants.
You're right, it does have a connotation.
But then, of course, I'm a Yankee and very prudish, as you know, lived a very prudish life.
Is that so?
No, I'm really very serious. I think it's a, well, as far as wearing them is concerned, they're marvelous for kids. Yeah. All these fashions are marvelous for kids. So as going back to what you first said about what you do consider, it's a daytime show, you wear sort of something like this.
Yeah.
If you come on for New Year's Eve, like I did before with you once, it was something gayer.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. This is seen at night, so that makes it very difficult when you're taping the daytime.
Yes, I'm not supposed to mention that, am I? Well, you can cut it.
Well, no, that's... Oh, can I?
I forgot. I'm very sorry.
No, I know you play independent women, but I'll give you a glass of water.
Will you?
Yes, you don't need to do that yourself.
No, I...
Say, you talking about being prudish. Do you remember the talk show one time where Tom Smothers asked you if you fool around?
Oh, mess around.
Oh, was it
He
mess
said, would you
around?
mess around a little? And I fell on the floor.
Yeah.
And actually,
Which is a
never
sort
been
of
so...
answer,
well, I've never
actually.
been so...
Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, I hope they
You're
got...
too sharp today.
I'm sorry.
Too sharp this evening.
Let us attack that from another direction.
No, but I was very, very proud. I was very proud as an older woman that he would say that to me. You can't imagine. It set me up for days.
I don't remember you... Sorry, you... I'll catch up with you in a moment, but first... it's always an honor to have a great lady of the theater here, and then go into a kitty litter commercial. But here's John Baker, world-renowned cat breeder, and his prize Burmese Ferdinand, with a word about new litter green. Talking with Bette Davis. When people ask you about people that you made films with, who do they most want to know about? My guess now would be Bogey. You and Humphrey Bogart made your first film together, and...
Oh, yes, the first film at Universal called Bad Sister. Yes,
Yeah.
both of them. I think it was his first film, too.
I think it was, yeah. I checked
Actually,
it.
appalling film.
Was it?
He was the city slicker.
Yeah.
And the script was just like that, the city slicker. I was the good sister.
You?
Yes. Oh, yes, well, really, that is my image, basically. I only play parts of other people.
Yeah.
Now I'm old and the evil has come out a little more. But at that time, no, it was very amazing that I went into that other area. And I only went into that other area because those were the good acting parts. And just playing heroines was never very fascinating to me. You know, I always was basically a character actress from the beginning.
It would be a waste, I would think, to have you
Well,
too
it's
many
just
good
boring,
sister
and
roles.
also I didn't like myself very well. So if you play just a heroine, there's nothing to hide behind, you see. And there's no question about it in my mind at this point that actors are people who are not very fond of themselves, therefore they love being other people. I'm convinced of this. For years I couldn't decide. This must be the basic drive, that we want to get away from ourselves. And when you play a heroine, you can't get away from yourself. You must just be yourself. And that's the hardest thing to play.
When
really.
did you realize that? How long did it take for that to sink in? Did you deny it for years?
No, I didn't deny the doing of it, but I always thought about it a lot and wondered if that were the truth. And I'm convinced that is the truth.
But you're such a marvelous... Deceit becomes you in the movies.
Glad you added in the movies. Because I'm a very undeceitful person, you see. No, truthfully.
In life?
This is one of my tragedies. I'm far too honest. I should have learned years ago to sort of be half honest. You know.
Did you ever get to a point in your career where you thought you were often a rebel and fought with the studios and fought with people that you're not supposed to fight with and
You know, that word fight is I've thought about that a lot, and it's given me a terrible reputation, just that word. It really isn't fighting. It's really a deep determination to have it the way you believe it should be. And that is legitimate in a career or in business or in anything. I mean, you must have discussions, for instance, people over you on this show of what you believe this show should be. That's not really a fight. It's a bad word. It's just a conviction. And nothing is going to stop you from winning this conviction.
But you're driven to the point finally where you have to fight it because nobody understands
sometimes
what a performer is.
it ends up in rather a brawl, yes.
Yeah.
But it isn't basically that you want to fight, because I'm not a person who really loves to fight. I think it takes a lot out of you, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, the energy is spent on that comes out of
It's
your...
much easier to say, yes, I'll do what you say. Much easier.
Anybody ever take you aside and say, you better be careful, you can't argue with people like Jack Warner and all these big people?
I look back on it now and I wonder. I must have had a lot of courage as a very young person, because it wasn't easy to go into Mr. Jack Warner to try and win a point about a script or whatever. I was to be scared to death, matter of fact. Then you success helps you. Eventually, if you become gradually more successful, then you have more security going into your boss. But I started out in the very beginning to have convictions about what I should do, you know? Like cheesecake, for instance. I never did cheesecake. And this, in those days, was an enormous argument not to get into bathing suits and all that kind of photography. And I always said, if I get anywhere, I don't want those pictures of me around. And there's not a nude of me anywhere.
Nowhere? You've never been nude?
Well, of course, in that day, can you imagine nude pictures? My Lord.
There was no such thing. They couldn't.
Oh, no such thing.
imagine.
Oh, no, we wore Anna Kellerman suits, you know, although we were all covered up. There weren't bikinis or anything. But even that I didn't like, because I thought that had nothing to do with acting, and I thought it was cheap.
You said that you actors don't like themselves, and that's why they go into acting. Did you find that you also did not like your appearance? You often said they shouldn't cast you in certain ways because
Oh,
you
I
looked
never
wrong
could
for them, and
bear
yet
to look at myself.
No one can. It's hard to believe that.
No,
It's
never
just hard
could bear
to believe
it.
it.
Never could bear it. And when I think of how I look now and how I looked then, I was a perfect fool. I looked just great. It's true. What on earth I was complaining about? I just, when I see Jezebel or Victory, I just look at that gorgeous-looking thing, and then I look in the mirror and I say, you beefed about it. No, directors kept me out of rushes. Oh, they wouldn't let me go. I'd be upset for days.
Because it drove you berserk to look at
I just
yourself.
couldn't stand my face, ever. No.
Gee.
No, never.
Well,
Still can't.
I could stand it then. I liked it then, and I like it now.
Well, thank you, Richard, very
okay.
much. Thank you very much.
We have a message from our local stations. We'll be right back. Miss Davis, what does it mean that you went to England to try to break your contract with Warner Brothers?
Well,
I've never understood that.
Well, I left Warner's because of scripts.
Mm-hmm.
I realized after 2 or 3 years of Housewife and Bureau of Missing Persons and Parachute Jumper and a few little dillies like that nothing much was going to happen with my career. And so I just decided I believe in life, if you're going to beef about something, do something about it. Mm-hmm. So I said, if you're beefing and unhappy, go. And my last meeting with Jack Warner was quite marvelous because he sent for me. He said, please don't leave. We've just optioned a marvelous new book. And of course, at that point,
You'd heard that before.
I'd heard that before. He said, we've just optioned a marvelous new book called Gone with the Wind for you. I said, I'll bet it's a dilly.
Oh.
And I came back a year later and I found out it was a dilly the other way.
They made a movie of
so
that,
I went
didn't
to
they?
England. I signed they made a movie of that.
Yes.
I signed a contract with a man in England for a film. Mm-hmm. to precipitate what would happen with Warner's. And of course, he injuncted me, and we went into the English courts. Mm-hmm. And it was basically a legal argument, because you see, whatever you refused to do under those contracts, they could add onto your time until the film was finished. Uh-huh. So you could have a 5-year contract that would last a lifetime, unless you did everything they told you to do. So that's what this was all about. So that Warner Brothers did away with their suspension clause and gave me a final ending to my contract no matter what happened. But of course, when we got back to America, that was English law. And Olivia de Havilland won this case in America. She was kept on suspension for a year, I believe. And she went to court, and she is the one we can all thank for the 7-year contract. But it was basically my same trial.
What films, when you do see them, speaking of Gone with the Wind, do you wish you'd been in?
I was absolutely dying to do Anna with Rex Harrison, not in the musical version, but the one they made first. They made it first, you know.
As a drama?
As a drama.
Yeah.
I was dying to play that part.
What keeps you from getting it, then?
I was under contract, and they would not loan me out.
Same thing.
They only loaned me out twice, once for bondage and once for foxes.
Don't you feel like...
In those 18 years.
Feel like a cattle or something?
And I also had a vague chance that it happened one night. That disappointed me terribly. Yeah. Because I was always, every now and then, wanting some kind of lighter kind of thing for variety, because I always believed in variety. You mustn't get into the same niche and just keep going.
I never asked a film star this, but if your private life is going well, does it necessarily mean you'll work well, or can it work the other way, that if it's going badly for some reason, your work will get better?
I've never had the question asked.
You know what I'm asking? Is there any correspondence between how your private life is going?
Well, let's just say it is far easier to go to work at 6 in the morning if your private life is charming. It's far easier to come home. Many businessmen know this. We've read all these articles about this, coming home to the wife and the dishwasher and the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And they're very, very tired. And if you come home at night and you have a charming, pleasant home after a very hard day, which I'm sure you know, you aren't nearly as exhausted. Mm-hmm. But I have a lovely story. One of the greatest tragedies of my life had happened just before Dark Victory, which I peddled at Warner's for years to get them to do. When they Mr. Warner finally said, well, nobody will ever go and see this, because who wants to see a woman who dies? but you love to act, have a ball. That was the way he sent me on. So I was proud to say it made a little money. But anyway, I was in a terrible state, terrible state. So, and Mr. Wallace was executive then, and so I went up to him after a week and I said, Mr. Wallace, you have to recast me. I've wanted to play this part for years. I am ruining it. I am a complete wreck, and of course did not tell anybody why. And he just said, stay sick. In other words, the first week's work was just fine. Yeah. And interestingly enough, in that particular film, because of her glioma and her illness, we did all the scenes first in the doctor's office. There was an added thing in me that I think added to the performance. No question about that.
Of course, he's right that no one would go.
But no, I think it's so much easier a happy home for professional people, because we really do work under great nervous strain, you know?
Yeah, the strain in the one place is enough.
Yes.
But he's right, no one would go see a movie about a woman dying. Love story is bombing all over the place.
Oh, I know, love stories bombing all over the place, absolutely.
Hasn't sold a ticket.
Well, but this was a long time ago.
Yeah.
They did not have that many, because I never felt Dark Victory was an unhappy ending. I felt it was courage for people who had to face something like this, which I think it is. But they didn't make films like, you know, these were revolutionary kinds of stories for that day. This is a long time ago. 71, what, in the 40s. So that was an unusual script for that day.
You may take this as a compliment or not, I don't know, but what I think is so great about you is that you were more interesting many times than the character you played or the picture you were in. And we get to know you. You're the interesting thing. You're so damn much more interesting than some of the women that you've played because the scripts were not great or whatever.
Yes, so many of those. Well, that's a nice...
That must be what
there
makes...
are many scripts that aren't, and of course then the actor is put upon to try and make the character at least somebody the audience will be interested in, and that's the toughest kind of film to make in the world. The easiest kind of film to make in the world, of course, is when the characters are written beautifully. Like, you know, you can use the example of All About Eve. That's one of the great scripts ever written in the world. All any of us had to do was just come to work, love every minute of it, and say what Mr. Mankiewicz wrote. That's heaven. That happens about 4 times in your entire life in the theater, really.
What else do you look forward to? The leading man would make it important too, wouldn't he? Who you're working with, obviously. Who are the best screen lovers? I can't think of anybody I would really care to hear answer that.
I didn't work with any of the great.
I made a note of that. I wrote
great screen.
Cooper, Gable, or Grant. You didn't make.
No, you see, because in those days, if you had any kind of box office, you had to carry the film alone. For instance, I never really made a picture with Bogey. He was in Dark Victory with me very briefly before he became a star. And I always, there was a marvelous story called The Prize Fighter and the Lady, a marvelous play that I begged Warner to let Bogey and me make. Well, they wouldn't put us together. That was a waste. They could get 2 pictures, you know, instead of 1. Cagney, for instance, always wanted to do a really serious film with. We made a hideous thing called The Bride Came COD, which, you know.
What was the name of it?
The Bride Came COD, where he took cactus out of my fanny. You know, one of those comedies. Well, Warner's had said for years and years, you've got to do a comedy. And I finally said, all right, you're sick of my doing tragedy. That's what I meant to do, but any comedy you give me. So that's the one I got. They never asked me again.
No more cactus.
Well, there's no point to it. It was just a perfectly ghastly film. So I never really, truly worked with Jimmy either. The one I wanted to work with the most was Charles Lawton. Oh, how I wanted to have 2 of the meanest characters in the world written and play it with me. Because I adored him. But I never worked with any of the great lovers. Boyer, of course, I worked with, who was a pretty smashing guy in the love area, I would say, from the standpoint of the audiences. And that was a thrill. And Howard, of course, was worshipped by women, Leslie. But none of our so-called great screen lovers did I work with. And I worked with Spencer in one of our very first films before he even went to Metro, where I had a little bit in 20,000 Years in Sing Sing, but this was so many years ago. That would have been a thrill to have done one with him.
What's the film you would least like to see on The Late Show? If you see it on when you switch it off immediately, what's your biggest bomb?
There's so many. Well, there's one I would hate to ever see on the Late Show, which was, again, was Beyond the Forest. That's what a dump. That's when that was it.
Was what a dump in Beyond the Forest?
Of all the things that film is made famous. This hideous film is made famous by Mr. Edward Albee with What a Dump, you know.
Yeah.
That I hope never appears. I wouldn't like to see Parachute Jumper again. I wouldn't like to see In This Our Life because that was a heartbreak. It was Ellen Glasgow's great, great book, and it was without doubt one of the worst films ever made in the history of the world.
Cabin in the Cotton?
Now, I've got to tell you about this. Cabin in the Cotton has my favorite line in it that I ever spoke in my life. And this is it. I'd love to kiss you, but I just washed my hair.
That's great. And speaking of washing,
Yes?
here is a message about clean wash for you.
I used to
Cleaner
use-
water for everyone.
I've used that on here.
Have you?
Laundry.
On your hair? Looking for a job, and I couldn't resist. The staff brushed him up a bit, and here he is. Will you welcome Arte Johnson? They told me you were shy and uninhibited.
I am, essentially.
You can
Yes.
see that, yes, of course.
yes.
Oh, wait a minute. A man with your success on Laugh-In suddenly out of work? Is
Yes,
this a
I'm
joke?
no, I'm unemployed.
Unemployed.
I'm unemployed. I
Isn't
am-
anyone helping you? Can you take dictation? We're looking for...
Yes. No, strangely enough, I have somebody that's helping me. Somebody that, in fact, he reminded me that you made some statement in Bullets Durgam, the great legend.
There's no Bullets Durgam.
There is a Bullets Durgam, and he told me a story about you that I thought was fascinating, where you told about the time when you were in Hollywood and you used to watch Bullets driving up and back down the street in his Jaguar.
Yes, I wondered why I did that.
Well, he told me that you walked up to him and asked him one of your great ambitions was to be able to ride with him in that Jaguar. And I thought if that was an ambition, you were in such trouble.
I did. I used to see this man with his curious... Do you know who Bullets Durgam is? But he was Jackie Gleason's...
He was Jackie Gleason's
Agent
manager for a long time. Yeah.
I used to see him riding, and I always wanted to get into the car. I was a
Yes.
curious child.
Yes, I imagine. I could see you jumping from car to car. You're weird.
Miss Davis, would you like a gentleman to light that for you?
Oh.
It's very...
This is quite all right.
Don't be that independent.
But it's
Yes,
it's
sir.
not often that a man gets to light Bette Davis's...
Oh, I'm gonna save this match. This goes next to some of my better mementos. What were you gonna
You
ask
really
me?
know how to treat a lady, don't you?
Yes, I...
Isn't he smashing?
Oh,
Absolutely.
that was total charm. Why didn't we ever do a movie together?
Well, let's do it.
All right. Well, you name it, and we'll start it right now. Dick, you can leave.
You don't suggest... You don't... No, I
sorry.
insist on being in it or else stay.
Oh, good.
You don't act like any of the people that you do on Laugh-In, so I can't tell what part of your personality they come from. Is any of you German, for example?
No, none of me is German. I am a Middle Westerner. Everything that I do is based on observation, nothing else, because I really have had no opportunity to live in that realm or to mix with people like that. I think that essentially the way I developed all of these things was riding the public conveyances of the city of Chicago. And I just listened to the people talk, and I watched them, and over the course of time, I just put these things together, and they are what they are. And that's essentially what I've been
Where
doing.
do walnuttos work into this?
Well, this was a joke of mine that I had for a long, long time, and it was literally I had Tyrone, whose original name is not Tyrone. That's his theatrical name, by the way, the little old man.
Yes, what's his last
original
name?
name was Julius Andrews.
Uh-huh.
His friends called him Julie.
You mean the man he's based on?
Yes, Julie Andrews was his name. We found out he couldn't work in the business because he couldn't get his union card because there was some other fellow named Julie Andrews.
Also
So we
in the
had to
business.
change his name, and it became Tyrone F. Horneye.
How does one spell Horneye? You never see it written
As a
out.
Horneye is normally spelled.
Eh,
The French pronunciation would be Horney.
yes.
Horneigh. Horney. Yes. But for American consumption, it became Horneye.
Yes. Probably best that way.
It's much better that way because we could get in. Go ahead.
There are rumors that you... I'm going to take your personality and turn it inside out now in a way that
Yes.
never has been before, because I've never seen you reveal that you are a numismatist on the television before.
You know,
and, I know you were caught at
yes, I've been caught at
numismatism several
yes.
times.
No, I've collected coins for a rather lengthy period of time. It's among many of the things that I do with outside interest. I'm also a bibliophile. I am also a collector of porcelain, and my wife and I have quite an extensive collection of cattle figurines, various kinds in porcelain, silver, things of that nature. I'm just an inveterate collector. I love things and just go out and collect them.
What's the passion for coin collecting? I sometimes I pass a coin shop and it looks fun. I'd like to get in there and handle the coins. Is that what the fun is, handling the coins?
No, you don't handle the coins. In handling the coins, you in a sense damage them. Many of the coins that I have are like when you look at the intricacy of the design in them, you realize how much work went into making the original plate to design the coins. And some of them they're like little works of art in a strange, funny way. And the unfortunate part of coin collecting is the fact that you, in many instances, can't keep them in your home because of the insurance rates.
So you can't even have your little friends with you?
My little friends are all hidden in a box somewhere in a bank. Every once in a while, I go over there and I open the box and I look into it and go, "Hi, kids." You know, it's frustrating. It's a frustrating form of collection, I must say. It's very frustrating for a lot of people because of the fact that you can't exhibit these things because people have a tendency to want to touch them, and that is not good for the coins.
What's your top coin worth?
Somewhere in the range of $4,000. The original purchase, but the original purchase price was much, much less than that.
I dare you to show it to me.
Oh, you have that kind of a show. No,
Boy, Mr. Johnson.
This particular coin, I can't carry it with me, Dick. It's a very small coin. It's a very tiny coin, and it's.
What is it?
It was a 3-cent, what they call a 3-cent nickel.
Hey, I heard that you worked for a calendar company one time. Is that a skeleton that's hidden in your closet?
Oh no, I was.
Did you
I used to write calendars. I was very good on threes. You know, somebody turns to you and says, "Now it's time for you to write a calendar." What do? I literally learned how to count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Saturday 3rd, Friday 4th. How funny can you get? I did that for a period of time.
What does the job mean?
Well, there are major firms throughout this country that do make calendars, and there's a copy on the top of those calendars. You know, like American Blood Sausage and Screw Manufacturing Corporation will put out a calendar. You're not smiling even. You're in trouble in Nebraska. I'm taking Omaha away from you.
Yes, I was trying to remember that title. I'd like to use it sometime.
Yeah, but you have all of these various things, and they say, you know, for better undertaking, see Zincs or something. And that was the copy that you would append to the top of the calendar, and everybody had calendars. So that was literally one of the first jobs I had, and I was an abject failure because I just didn't know how. couldn't get with it. There was no emotion involved.
I would think there wouldn't be.
No.
I mean, you can only go so far.
That was essentially it was a very strange time in my life, frankly. But I learned numbers.
I'm gonna get out of here.
Where are you going? Would you like a glass of water?
Can I help you?
I come with you?
What did I say?
Now you've
What
done
did
it.
I
Look
say?
what you did.
I didn't say anything. I was talking about a calendar.
No,
I didn't. I'm sorry. Come back.
I'll tell you what
I'll
you
give
did.
you back the match. I didn't mean what I said.
You know what it is?
What?
I told you, Miss Davis was once attacked by a giant calendar.
Oh, I am.
And we warned every guest but you not to say the word calendar
I never
out
knew.
here.
Why didn't you tell me that?
How insensitive can you be?
I really, you know, I don't know how. No, you say, ask me something clever.
Okay, where were you or where was I during the earthquake?
Where I was home on the 10th floor of a high-rise when the earthquake occurred, and I must say it's something that I hope is never repeated in my lifetime.
It's not a good place to be at.
It was unparalleled in fear. I was terrified, terrorized. My wife, who is German, reverted to her German, and she sat there and actually was praying in German. And she had been buried alive in one of the bombing attacks on Bremen as an infant. And the memory came back to her, and all she did was keep repeating for the airplanes to go away. She felt that it was a bombing attack. It was a pretty terrifying time. It was, and the amazing thing was we had no damage of any sort or nature in our house, and we have a pretty extensive collection of porcelain figurines and things like that. Nothing at all broke, nothing moved, nothing happened. But for that 1 minute, it was probably the closest, I don't know, you know, it's a terrifying thing to even think about. It's something I'll always remember. I hope I never have to go through it again.
Hope you don't either.
No. Unless you want to come with me, we could have a picnic.
It's an odd side to you.
Yes.
Our local stations have a message. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Miss Davis.
I'm sorry for saying calendar.
Oh, it's all right.
Okay.
You've forgiven him.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Do you know that every time it seems that the Senate gets into a major squabble, my next guest is in the middle of it. He led the fight against the Haynesworth and Carswell nominations. He's battling the SST, and yesterday he participated in a triumph as floor manager for the bill giving the vote to 18-year-olds. It seemed like no one disagreed with him yesterday. It must be a rare sensation. The final Senate vote was 94-0. Would you welcome the junior senator from Indiana, Senator Birch Bayh. You want me to repeat that?
Well, I don't.
I'll tell him later. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I gotta tell him. You said you brought your pitchfork, and I think that's terrific for a politician. No, but seriously, folks.
It was really your line, you know.
It was mine.
Yes, it was your line.
But that's another attribute of politicians. They know a good thing when they see it.
Yes.
Is there any chance that the Constitution's going to be amended in time for the 18-year-olds to vote, the ones who are, for all of them to vote in this next big election?
I think so. It's amazing how in the last, really the last year, there's been a change. I think we can amend that before the 1972 election. I think the reason we can is that the 1970 Voting Rights Act, even though the Supreme Court cut it in half, still has enabled 18-year-olds to vote for president and senator and congressman. And this has enabled them to vote for the highest offices of the land, but inconsistently enough, they can't vote for the lower, more local offices. And I think the inconsistency, the injustice, and the cost involved in implementing this type of a dual system is going to make it possible for us to succeed at long last after a many years' struggle.
What's the argument against their voting, though? I've never heard a convincing one.
We are asking the wrong person.
But I ask you to assume a role now and argue against yourself in the best tradition of the old Greeks who used to have to learn to argue against their own position.
Well, the main argument is that young people just aren't qualified to vote. I don't buy that argument. I think anyone who's had the opportunity to be exposed to young people today can't help but be amazed not only at their sensitivity to national problems, but their awareness of how we should go about solving them.
Yeah, that is a dumb argument. Do the people who say that actually believe it, or is it they just don't want 18-year-olds to vote for other reasons?
Well, there may be other reasons. I think some people do believe this. And I think probably qualification is a relative thing. Perhaps I'm more qualified to be a senator today than I was yesterday. But the injustice of the voting system that sends young men to Vietnam, where the cold statistics on the battlefield show that half of them who died in Vietnam weren't old enough to vote for the public official to send them there. It seems to me this is not the type of democratic system we ought to be proud of.
It's a good argument.
Miss Davis mentioned she thought that was the best argument. I think that is a good one. I'm not sure that there aren't equally good arguments.
What's the clincher for you?
Well, there are two other general areas. One is that I think they're qualified. We turn so many young people off by not letting them participate at an earlier age. We lose a good raw material, to use very inhumanistic terms. And also there's a pragmatic argument. As we were holding hearings, we couldn't get some of the most far-out militant youth organizations, some of these groups that want to tear down and destroy the system, to come and say that 18-year-olds should be permitted to vote. And I asked myself why, and suddenly you realize that the main rallying cry that is being used toward young people is that there's no place for you in the system. And if the system itself purges itself of this inequity and young people are given a piece of the action, they can work within the system, then this totally destroys the rationale of those who say you have to destroy it. And I think all of us, young and old, ought to be encouraged and given full rein to work within the system. I've been trying to do that for a number of years, so perhaps I'm a bit prejudiced in that direction.
Yeah. We have a message, but I want to talk to you about something irritating I saw yesterday when we come back. We have a message. We'll be right back. Talking to Senator Birch Bayh from Indiana. What about, how many of us are being snooped on now that don't suspect it, and what's the status of the snooping investigations? Snooping is such an easy word, isn't it? They're spying on people, that's what it is.
probably all of us, maybe Miss Davis excluded.
Why me? What did I do?
Well,
And what did Miss Davis not do?
Anybody that speaks on live television with a German accent now, you know, it's... Very interesting. But no, we shouldn't laugh about that because, frankly...
Remind us
so
why it's bad
frightening.
to have people...
Well, we uncovered a
eavesdropped on.
document the other day which was an edict put out by the Army in which they had been commissioned to get involved in spying, observing, listening to a large number of citizens. There were some 300 different agencies this went out to, or sub-agencies. The recent check showed that there are about, there are over 7 million personality files, as they call them, over at the Pentagon. Significantly more, I think 21 million index cards of some people that need to be watched. Now, these are not subversives. You know, I'm not naive. I think there probably are some people in this country that would like to destroy our society and subvert it, foreign agents and this type of thing, but there aren't very many. And this snooping effort is directed at the citizen who participates in a peace march, who perhaps would carry a picket sign in front of a supermarket, the listening that goes on telephones, the spying on people like Adlai Stevenson III, Congressman Mikva, Congressman Koch, others, actual public officials.
And 2 people who were under 3 years old at the time they...
Yes,
that's amazing. That was in the paper yesterday. Because they had been exposed to drugs at the age of 3 and under, there were 2 individuals who were in the file for something that happened to them before they were 3.
I think one of the most alarming things about this, Dick, is that there seems to be some significant acceptance on the part of the average citizen. When you think of public spying or listening, this is something that the average citizen thinks is happening to someone else. A poll taken last year by one of the major networks really startled me when it showed that more than half of our citizens, I think it was about 56%, said they were in favor of repealing the Bill of Rights. Well, you know, this is not humorous, because I wonder if there aren't a number of people that sort of take for granted the liberties that are ours, that we could, inch by inch, slice at a time, lose our freedoms and end up as a totalitarian state.
You know what I would love if every American, no matter poor, rich, what, could live for 6 months in another country and they would know what we have here. Because they don't know these people, and they do take it for granted. It's really tough, because this is the only possible country to live in.
If you look at history and you see how a totalitarian state succeeds in subverting the individual, it's not the kind of thing where you awaken in the morning and there you have a man on a white charger that's running the country. But do you remember that quote that Hal Holbrook used on the closing his first episode in the Senator on Bold Ones? He used a quote that I like to use, describing what Pastor Niemöller said when he was asked to describe how the Nazis took over Germany. And he said, first they came after the Jews, and I was not a Jew, so I did not object. Then they came after the Catholics, and I was not a Catholic, so I did not object. Then they came after the trade unionists, and I was not a trade unionist, and I did not object. And then they came after me, and there was no one left to object.
Yes.
Well, I intend to object.
Artie, March 18th, very interesting, is the name of a special you'll be doing on NBC. And thank you, Senator, for being here. Thank you, Bette Davis.
I really enjoyed it.